Hello, welcome to another Museum FAQ video. I'm Paul Orselli, President and Chief Instigator of POW, Paul Orselli Workshop here on Long Island, as I'm sure you can tell from my background. This is a very special Museum FAQ, a unique Museum FAQ video, because not only is there one interesting co-conversationalists, there are two today. And so I'd like to welcome Christina Ferwerda and Helen Divjak. Thank you very much for coming on today. And I always like to start by having people tell us a little bit about their background, because it's always interesting to find out how sort of circuitous path that people arrived at where they are now. So maybe Helen, you could start us out, tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll throw that over to Christina before we launch into the main conversation.
Sure, yeah. So right now I'm an interpretive planner at Think Design here in New York. But I got my start, really I was trained as a historian, and then made my way into public history, working at museums, several archives, most notably in Seattle at the Museum of History and Industry. And then I moved over to the UK, worked for the National Army Museum, where we dealt with a lot of really difficult content. And then I went to the London Transport Museum, where I worked on a number of historic sites, and then came over to New York. Think picked me up, and I've been working on projects all over the country and also in the Middle East. But I think my heart really lies with heritage and community development and work. And I think, what's important to me is connecting with people and allowing people to connect with themselves and their own past and their own sense of identity and with one another. And that's why I got connected with Christina, because we're all about connecting.
So true. So I'm just going to launch right in because that felt like a perfect segue. My background is actually in education. So I moved to New York in 2001 and got a master's in education, and continued by working in several different institutions as an educator. So I used to always say I worked with audiences from 2 to 92 in museums all around New York City. So really got to know how did people come to museums, what were they looking for, what did they want to do, and from there moved over to Skolnick Architecture and Design and worked as an interpretive planner for them, most notably on a project in Bulgaria, the Children's Museum of Bulgaria, where I met you, Paul. And from there, in 2016, I started my own consulting business. And so have been consulting for folks all over the country, and working with some design firms who need help with interpretation. And have been really enjoying that, and recently have been doing a lot of work with smaller institutions in and around New York City, which has been really satisfying. And as Helen said, when I think about community and working with folks where I know my work will make a difference, it's really nice to know that some of the things that I'm doing are having impact right around me in places where I can go and places where I can see people using my exhibits, talking about my exhibits, learning new things, and so forth.
Great. Well, again, welcome to both of you. And today we are going to talk about fun. So, of course, this is going to be a fun Museum FAQ conversation. And this is sort of predicated by the fact that you both have written an article that will be in the fall 2020 Exhibition Journal, not specifically only on fun, but touching on ways that museums can, I was going to say, how can museums become more fun? And there are some people who don't necessarily think of the word museum and the word fun in the same sentence together, which is kind of too bad, but there we are. So I thought maybe we could just talk rather than trying to hammer out the impossible task of coming up with a definitive statement or definition about what fun is, or fun in museums is, maybe we could start out by talking a little bit about both of your interests in the topic of fun as it relates to museums, just in general, to lay out the sort of general sort of points that you both are interested in as you've been exploring and researching and writing about this topic. And then we can get into some specifics and maybe some takeaways for folks. So with that fun lead in, let's talk about fun. Maybe Christina, if you want to start this time, what are some things that you and Helen have been thinking about and talking about related to fun and museums?
Yeah, so I think, and maybe I'll start just with my personal experience coming from an education background, and starting out in education programming. There was a real value to school groups and family programs, family visitors having a good time at institutions, and really making a distinction between the museum as not the classroom. You know, they're coming here to not just do the same thing that they're doing in their classroom, but to have something that's really different, and you know, a place where people who don't learn in a classroom manner have the opportunity to excel. And I think that was something really important about my experience as an educator. And then it was always really interesting to me that once you got to adult audiences, it sort of transitioned to, you know, it might include things like conversation or using VTS strategies, but there was always kind of a more serious side to it. But one of the things that I always took away is that the guides who, you know, were able to incorporate a little bit of humor and did that really successfully were always the ones that kind of got the best reviews, or were able to really keep people engaged. And so, you know, I think there's this real hard line between creating things that are for kids, like children's museums. There's this expectation that, you know, kids are going to want to run around and that you can convey a lot of valuable information, but that it's got to have kind of that glue, that, you know, feeling of fun as glue that will attract people, kind of keep them in the space. And I think Helen and I really started talking because it was like, but wait, this is something that everybody needs, wants, and deserves. Yeah, that's right.
So,
yeah,
Helen? How does everybody need and deserve fun in a museum?
Well, definitely underlining everything Christina says, it seems like people understand in children's museums or even in science centers that kids having fun is this great thing. But when it comes to other types of museums or adults in museums, that suddenly it has to be a more serious endeavor. So it's as if we've forgotten how to have fun while we're learning, or that we can have fun while we're learning. And sort of the instigation of us doing this research too goes back to a study in 2017 that LaPlaca Cohen did, Culture Track, that found that the majority of people are turning to cultural institutions because they want to have fun. It's not just because of learning or because they want to have some sort of cultural cachet. They want to be considered, you know, well-to-doers or arty-farty people, but they just really want to have fun, and that they're looking for that. And for me to think, okay, people are telling museums that they want to have fun and they are coming here to have fun. And we know, Christine and I know from observing, having worked with adult audiences and young audiences in numerous contexts, whether that's exhibits or public programming, that people come expecting to have fun. Not that that's the only thing they expect, but that's one of the things they're expecting to have, that they want to have fun, and that the people that come back are the people that did have fun. So it just seemed like there is this gap. And if we're hearing that that's what people want, you know, going to a museum shouldn't be like eating a vegetable. you know.
it's
I mean, I love vegetables.
unless it's a vegetable museum, I don't know. You know that, but it's interesting. We're saying that people, when you really get down to the heart of it, a lot of people, the reason they want to go to a museum is to have fun and enjoyable experience. Nobody wants to go to a museum like, well, let me have an unenjoyable and unfun experience. And also, it's funny, you both sort of touched on museums being an antidote to other situations in life, like school or adulthood, that aren't always fun. And that museums can really be a place of enjoyment and fun. That's interesting.
I just wanted to add on just this idea that I think the other thing that really struck us is when we started to talk to our colleagues, there was this real kind of like, ooh, fun, yeah, we don't do that. And so it almost seemed like like the museum field takes itself very seriously, and of course it should, but that fun was kind of not worthy of it's not a worthy offering for our audiences. We have to offer, deep information about our mission, or, about climate science or the history of a specific place, and that somebody just having this really wonderful experience was not on equal par. And so I think that was also something that we really, I think we'd like to get to the heart of in our research, is that fun has value. It is important for many reasons, and can help you do as a museum person many of the things that you're desiring to do in terms of communicating your mission or getting people interested in climate science or whatever, kind of critical, informative, and also, I'm going to say maybe transformational things you'd like to offer to your public.
And fun is not, what we were coming across was this idea of like that sort of ewness about fun, was that it was vapid or it lacked worth, or like, as Christina said, it was somehow not.
We're dumbing down the experience.
Yeah. Exactly.
We're a serious organization, high-minded.
Exactly. So it's not, if we do with serious topics, we have to be serious about it. And it's not to say that fun is the only strategy. Of course it's not. But there seems to be this big window of opportunity, and also sort of without, if you don't recognize the potential that fun could have for opening up somebody's mind to something they never thought about before, because they're having fun and doing something that's different or difficult or a little bit scary, but they're having fun while doing it. Just again, as a major missed opportunity. So that was something that really attracted us both to it. And I think anytime that we see a little bit of pushback from our colleagues, I have to think, okay, there's something here. There's a reason that we're getting pushback, that we need to sort of unpick this a little bit and press on those sensitivities.
Well, and I think it's important for the people who are creating these museum experiences, exhibitions, programs, what have you, if they're not enjoying it, putting these things together, if they're not having fun or sincerely interested in what they're putting together to offer to the public, why do we think our visitors are going to be interested or have fun with it? So I think that's great.
I also applaud that.
Yeah.
So, well,
that was part of our conversations as well. It's like,
yeah.
But you have to have fun while you're doing it. If you and your exhibit team are just like struggling through and let's say like doing all the work while crying, it's
or just mailing it in and not really not being sincerely enthusiastic about it. Well, speaking of sincerely enthusiastic, I'm wondering if maybe each of you might share either a specific example or a specific aspect that could provide a takeaway for people who are watching the video, who are like, yeah, they're right. Well, how can we integrate more fun, or how can we think of fun as a jumping off point for our offerings? So maybe Helen, I don't know if you could offer maybe an example from an institution, or that might provide a specific takeaway that you think is foundational for fun. What about that?
Mm-hmm. Well, what you just said is absolutely critical to creating fun in a museum. And that is, as a team that is building that experience, whether it's a design team or programming team or education team, you have to be having fun while you're doing it. Again, it doesn't mean that it's all fun. You have to do the serious work. You have to do the research. You have to do the audience research. But
Serious fun. Serious fun.
Serious fun. But in the end, if you're not finding time to laugh, if you're not finding time to connect with the people you're building this with, that sort of melancholy, could I call it, that weight will transfer into your work. So you need to be able to dig deep to find the joy, so that joy gets released in the work that you're doing. That's absolutely fundamental. And that can be as simple as like starting every meeting with a silly joke or a silly hat. I don't know. But I think something else that's really critical is understanding that people have fun when they feel safe, right? And I think the example that Christina and I talked about was bungee jumping. You don't just go bungee jumping. You go bungee jumping with, you do your research and you find a place that's going to make you feel absolutely safe. And so what we have to do as museum practitioners is make sure that the environment that we are creating for that fun feels safe to your target audience. So making sure that means fun. That doesn't just mean physical safety, which of course is on the top of mind for all institutions right now in the COVID crisis, but also means intellectual and emotional safety, that people feel like this is a safe space where I can let loose, where I can let my imagination go, where I don't have to worry about who else is in the room. And that's going to vary from, whatever your initiative is. But taking the time to think about, how do I make sure that my audiences feel safe? And again, stressing that safety is not just health and safety or physical safety, but really that emotional and mental safety is really critical to creating a fun environment.
So is there a particular institution that comes to mind, Helen, that sort of provides a safe haven for fun, a comfortable spot for visitors that you think comes to mind?
One that we looked at, a case study that we looked at for our article was a pop-up exhibit that was put in the Lewisham Shopping Center in London. And if you were to look at it online or go visit, you would have seen a very brightly lit, cheerful, like I would use the word sunny exhibit. But the exhibit was about death and dying. It was about how people can make better choices.
Natural topics for a fun conversation at any gathering.
Right. So you think here was an exhibit that was trying to empower people to understand all these decisions that they have to make at their end of their life, which is already a scary time of your life, a time that you already feel overwhelmed, and trying to disarm people. And so in this case, they actually use like the power of aesthetics, of creating a welcoming space through color, through texture, through lighting, through the actual graphic imagery that they're using was associated with sort of a sunny holiday, rather than dark colors and purple and velvet and heavy furniture that you might expect, or even like just pure white, which is kind of the other end of the spectrum. So I think even just paying attention to the aesthetics of the space can do a lot for and that might seem obvious, but it's something that I think often we kind of speed past that. And so really paying attention to everything from the texture, color palette, lighting, and then the sound treatment, so it's not a loud echoing space, or does it need to be a loud echoing space? So all those design elements that are really fundamental to how somebody physically experiences a space is really important.
No, that's great. And Christina, how about you? Was there a particular example that strikes you, or a particular aspect of setting a fun, a situation ripe for fun that stood out for you?
I mean, there are several. So maybe I'll touch on two. And one immediately, just because Helen shared about this exhibit in the Lewisham Shopping Center. One of the things that we learned was about pairing fun with fact, and also really reinforcing, in that case, because it's a difficult topic, reinforcing a fun environment and a fun experience with person-to-person contact. So, and this is really specific to the article that we wrote. We really looked at how fun can reinforce or serve to communicate around difficult topics. And that was one of the big takeaways, is that fun on its own is not necessarily, it's the glue, and it's something that makes you more open. But there does need to be kind of like this personal interaction that will reinforce deeper information around that topic. I think the other thing that across the board I took away from this experience and from our research on fun is just about, and we touched on this a little bit before, about really understanding your audience. So one of the places that we got a lot of inspiration, and we did find a lot of kind of precedent projects, and it's one of the only areas where there is actually critical research studies that include the word fun. So I think that was another big takeaway, is that nobody's studying fun. No one is trying to understand how fun is important.
Maybe it's too hard to study fun. Maybe it's not fun to study fun.
I mean, I don't know. I thought it was pretty fun to study fun, actually. But you know, there's a lot of information in zoos and kind of natural history museums that really looks at fun and what their audiences really consider fun. So, for example, there was a study in Chicago that looked at visitors to the Brookfield Zoo who said, you know, I am enjoying a fun day out with my family. I would describe that as feeling close, or having like a personal connection with animals. And so I think it's really interesting when you think about zoos and the way that they are now evolved and kind of setting up their interactions. There are a lot more opportunities for you to feel, you know, whether it's using kind of a glass or plexi treatment instead of a big fence, so that you maybe get to see things a little bit closer. There's less of, I'm going to say, a psychological barrier, that while still having a physical barrier to kind of reiterate what Helen is saying about feeling safe. So design has kind of naturally evolved to reinforce and provide that feeling of fun. There were other examples that we talked about where, understanding humor, what people thought was funny, and that's, you know, regional and cultural, and has so many elements that feed into it. So the folks who have used humor successfully have not just done initial studies, but have done a lot of formative study to understand kind of where is the line, right? Yeah. Humor is funny right up to a certain point, and then it can kind of tip into like too cheesy, too off color. And so really just using formative evaluation to, again, deeply understand how to use humor, how to use a feeling of adventure, how to use play that doesn't kind of tip over into a different line, and that suits your audience and your content.
Well, it seems clear from the things that both of you have said that really the success of fun experiences is really the way it's integrated, that it becomes glue, that it's not just something wallpapered over, that it's integral to the design, it's integral to people's comfort level, it's integral to tying facts and fun together in a meaningful way. So I think, you know, if we sort of trivialize fun, like it, you know, it turns into a Three Stooges short with pies being shoved in people's face. Although that's fun, I guess. But you know, I like the notion that both of you have emphasized about how to integrate fun in a meaningful way into the experience so that it really is integrated and in a comfortable and an enjoyable level for people. Well, I have found this conversation fun. I think this is just a teaser for people to through the magic of video, because we don't know when people will actually be watching this video, so they might be watching it and anticipating your article coming out in fall 2020, because we're videoing this before fall 2020, but who knows, they might be watching it right when they can access your video too. So that's fun, you know, we're playing with that. I don't know if there's any last word that either of you would like to say as we wrap things up. One like important thing that's just burning to say about fun, or if we leave it there, I'll give you each the last word.
Well, one thing that I would add is, you know, this conversation is taking place in June of 2020. We've been through a really tough year.
Not fun things.
With a lot of unfun things. So that aside, going back to the study I mentioned earlier by LaPlaca-Cohen and Slover Linnet are releasing another study this week about what people have missed from cultural institutions since they've been closed. I saw some of the preliminary results, and what made me happy was that, again, people are saying, I miss having fun in a cultural institution. I want cultural institutions to provide me with fun, especially in a time when people are really struggling with a lot of heavy things that are going on in our world, from the COVID crisis to social justice issues to the continuing climate crisis. They are looking to us to provide them with solutions, but also to provide them with some levity and some laughter. So those two things don't have to be diametrically opposed. We don't have to provide solutions that are heavy in a heavy way. We can still provide joy and a little bit of relaxation and a relief. So I'm very much looking forward to, after this talk, is Christina are going to stay connected and keep researching this. We don't think that this article is the end to our research, so stay tuned.
Well, and we will definitely include, as they say in the description below, ways for people, if you would both be kind enough to provide links and resources, but also ways, as long as you're comfortable, for maybe people to contact you who might be interested in learning more or continuing the conversation. We'll also do that. Yeah. All right, well, Christina, you got a last word?
I was just going to add on to what Helen said by saying that I think you can see the institutions that got a lot of headlines during COVID embrace strategies that really reinforced fun. And that, yes, Helen and I would be thrilled to speak with anybody who wants to talk about fun and how they could use it, or how they are using it as part of their engagement strategy.
Awesome. Well, this was fun. It's always nice to speak with both of you, and I look forward to the opportunity of visiting a fun museum experience in person together at some point in the future. So
I'd love
that. Thanks so much, Christina and Helen, for the conversation today. And as I said, we'll provide information and resources and ways for people to contact you to continue the conversation. So thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Paul.
Take care.